Just when I thought I could finally escape this nightmare, a strong hand suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled me back. It turned out he had been watching me all along. Chapter 9, Mission Runaway. After getting ready to go shopping, I still didn't have it in me to go with him. I couldn't even say his name. How dare he just command me and mark his territory when I'm not his? He doesn't own me. I'm just his victim. I don't even know why I have to go shopping with him. It wasn't like I was actually staying here all my life. Yes, there were only about 3 suits of clothing in the closet and I was wearing the second pair, but it was a pair too much because I wasn't staying here long enough to wear the third. As much as I oppose the idea of shopping, doing it with my kidnapper was a whole other level of insanity and completely outlandish in my books. I never really understood the perks and enjoyment one gets while spending an entire day walking around in crowded stores, doing nothing more than spending all their money and liquidating their bank accounts on nothing more than material things that might not even last a year. You can call me cheap, but I prefer the term thrifty. It had a better ring to it. But considering that I didn't exactly walk with cash whilst being kidnapped, I guess Thane was paying. At least that was a plus. This trip seemed to be becoming more appeasing as I thought about it, because it did open an opportunity for me. I just had to play my cards right and hopefully I will be within the confines of my home by tonight. Things seemed to be in my odds as I stepped out of the bedroom and walked towards the living room of the top floor, and saw Thane. He looked dejected, like he was about to beg for my forgiveness from the look on his face. I felt like jumping for joy, but in all honesty I felt like comforting him. Note to self-check into the mental institute when I get home. As soon as I stepped into the room, he looked up at me with those puppy dog eyes. Those beautiful brown eyes. They looked like a sea of chocolate and I was definitely drowning in it. I mentally slapped myself to snap out of this trance state I fell into. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Thane whispered. I simply gave him the silent treatment in return. I walked to the kitchen fully aware that he was following me. Time to implement step 1. I grabbed a glass of water as he stood on the opposite side of the counter. Emery, I know what I said was inexcusable and unwarranted, but you have to believe me when I say I'm sorry. Can you please just look at me? He gently asked. I know he wanted to try those darn puppy dog's eyes that makes me melt inside, but I didn't want him to know that was my kryptonite. I reluctantly turned around and saw a glimmer of a smile appear on him, but disappeared just as quickly as it came, as his entire facial features held torment. I constantly sipped my water and looked into my glass so I wouldn't be trapped in those chocolate sea-cold eyes. The heat of the moment got to my head and I said things I wish I could take back. I know I don't own you, Emery, and that's the last thing I meant to say. Hurting you is the last thing on my agenda, and I didn't mean to do it. I know it's selfish of me to ask this, but please forgive me. Please. The look in his eyes, the sincerity he displayed, and my stupid heart all wanted me to forgive him. And I would have, but my brain overpowered all that with common sense. I continued to not speak to him, and when he saw I was in no rush to answer, he continued. Tell me what to do to make it better. Tell me what to do to make it hurt less. Tell me what I can do to earn your trust, your forgiveness. You looked broken. Let me go alone. I mumbled. He looked taken aback that I actually spoke to him. Sorry, I didn't hear you. You said what you can do to earn my trust. Well, for that to happen you can let me go shopping alone. I need some time. At least a few hours of solitude so I can be able to think for myself and get a breath of fresh air. I declared, looking at him. No, absolutely not. He finalized. Yeah, I thought that was pretty far-fetched. That's why I had a backup plan. At least let me go alone with Bailey. She can come, but I am going with you. Weren't you the one saying how you thought her and I would be great friends? And to be honest, she is my only friend in this place. Plus, I need a girl's advice on what to buy, not a guy's. And you want my trust. So let me go or I may never forgive you. I threatened. He contemplates this for a moment as I pray that he agrees. He finally opened his mouth to speak and I held my expectations very high. Okay, fine, you can go with Bailey. I smiled brightly as I cut him off and said, Yay. Wait. You didn't let me finish. There isn't anything else for you to say. I answered. He gave me a pointed glare but went on. I will be driving you there and picking you up. I wanted to detest, but I knew that was the best offer I would get, and by the looks of things, he wasn't going to change his mind. I mumbled, I'm going to take a quick shower. Why don't you go find Bailey? She should be in the kitchen. Thane told me as he walked to the bedroom. I skipped down the stairs, happy as everything in my plan was going smoothly. So far at least. When I entered the kitchen, I immediately spotted Bailey as she was taking out a pie from the oven, and I was consumed with the delicious aroma. There were about 4 other women in there. 2 looked a year or 2 older than me, while the other 2 were much older. Probably mid-40s at least. What smells so good? I asked as I walked towards Bailey. Hey, Emery. She greeted me with a smile as I approached her. Hey. I said, looking at the mouth-watering pie. Want a piece? She asked, looking at me practically drooling. I nodded my head in gusto as she immediately grabbed a plate and sliced a piece of cherry pie for me. My favorite. Gimme. 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 I hurried her as she laughed at my excitement. As I was about to put a beautiful piece of pie to my lips, Bailey stopped me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You may want to wait, she warned. I dismissively waved her off with my fork as I shoveled a generous amount of pie into my mouth. Let's just say that wasn't exactly the best idea. Hot, I said with my mouth filled with pie. Bailey had an "I told you so" smile as she handed me a glass of milk. I'm not sure if to tell you I was right or give you the life lesson of patience is a virtue. I teased her when my mouth finally extinguished from the inferno. It was then that I remembered there were others in the kitchen as well. Bailey must have noticed me shifting in my seat uncomfortably as she spoke up. Let me introduce to you to everyone. This is my mom, Kate. She and Mrs. Grant here are 2 of the many persons that usually cooks for the pack. She told me as both Bay's mom and the other woman gave me a pleasant smile before going back to their chatting and working. Over here is my sister Abigail that I was telling you about, and her friend Layla. Bailey concluded. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Bailey's adopted sister, and her friend gave me a fake smile, but Abigail was shooting daggers at me. She made me feel as if I ran over her cat. And everyone, this is Emery. Our new Luna. Bailey introduced me. I started getting accustomed to the term Luna, yet I still had no idea what it meant. What if it meant some bad word, or what if it meant mistress and everyone thought I was Thane's lady? That got me a little paranoid, but when Bailey declared me as such, both the older women looked at me with such respect. Pride and hope that all my worries blew out the door. They didn't even know me, yet they looked at me like I was some goddess or leader to them. I guess Luna wasn't such a bad word after all. Abigail still looked at me with such disdain, but I guess that was just her natural look. Not everyone was perfect. Her friend did bow her head a little at my presence, but that was it. She was also throwing nasty looks my way. Bailey saw my predicament with her sister and quietly whispered, "Don't take them too seriously. They're just jealous." She winked at me, but I had no idea why they would be jealous of me. Maybe they also wanted to be kidnapped. It was beyond me, but I knew I landed in Crazy Town the moment I woke up in this house. "So what's up?" Bailey asked as she took a seat next to me on the bar stools. That reminded me why I came down here in the first place. I was wondering if you would go shopping with me. I thought Thane was taking you, she asked, and as soon as Thane's name popped up in the question, I saw Abigail direct her attention to our conversation. He was, but I needed girls' help with shopping, not Thane's. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please, come with me, I begged as I gave her my best puppy dog eyes. Let me think about it. She went silent for a few seconds, and I became worried that step 2 of my plan was faltering. Yes, of course I will go with you. I need a few things myself, she said excitedly, and I sighed in relief. Step 2 completed. I could tell from her excitement that she was going to make me shop till I drop. Literally, Bailey was already dressed, so we continued chatting as I ate my cherry pie. I suddenly felt a hand go around my shoulder, and I immediately knew it was Thane from the sparks I felt from the touch and his amazing scent. I tensed from the sudden contact, but I surprisingly relaxed a bit under his arm. "You girls ready?" he asked us. I was about to answer, but a little rat butted into our conversation. "Thane. Hey, how are you?" Abigail walked up to us and placed her uneasy hand on his arm that was not around my shoulder. I didn't know why I was so furious, but I was raging at her hands on him. I looked up at him to see his reaction to her, but surprisingly enough, he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. "I'm fine," he simply answered, not bothered by her. He kept looking at me in a searching gaze, as if he was trying to figure out if I had forgiven him or not. Or maybe he figured out my plan. I turned my face away before my eyes revealed something that led to my escape plan. "So I haven't seen you around much. Like before," she said in a seductive way, cutting me out of my thoughts. Was this girl blind or half-wit? Thane wasn't even giving her a second of his time. He wasn't even looking at her. "I've been with my girl." Hold up, did he just say, "my girl"? I nearly died. And not because I was swooning over him. Well, I cut her off before she could finish her sentence. "We're ready," I announced as I suddenly stood up and moved in between Thane and Abigail to get her slimy hands off him. I grabbed Bailey's hand on my way out and led her towards the front door. I don't know what took over me, but I felt this strange feeling of anger towards Abigail. I didn't even know her, so why do I feel this resentment towards her, and so what if she liked Thane? It wasn't as if I was interested in him. Abigail continued to talk to Thane, but I couldn't stand her, so I continued walking. Not long after, maybe less than a minute, Thane met us outside, keys in hand. He had a worried expression on his face as he approached us. "You know, if you wanted more time to flirt with her, we would be more than willing to go by ourselves," I said to him. "Isn't that right, Bailey?" When I looked at Bailey, she looked like a deer caught in the highlights and quickly avoided our gaze as she took more interest in the trees surrounding us. "Don't drag me in your little squabble," she quietly mumbled. "Emery," I cut him off. "No, by all means. If you want to go get some, go right ahead. I mean, after all, I'm just your kidnapped victim." I shrugged, turning my gaze away from him so he wouldn't see how much it actually affected me. I felt tears pricking the rim of my eyes, and I fought with my conscience that I was just being silly and I didn't actually care about him. I had to keep my emotions in check to play out my mission at hand. Thane suddenly grabbed me by my shoulder and gently turned my chin so I was facing him. "Listen to me." I opened my mouth to testify, but he cut me off. "No, I don't want to hear it. It's your turn to listen to what I have to say. She and I aren't together. I never liked her and I never will. There is only one girl I have my eyes on. One girl that stands out to me, and one girl I truly care for. One girl that already stole my heart and may not know it yet." He beautifully concluded. But it shattered me. I keep telling myself I don't like him, but I don't even know anymore. My mind is saying one thing and my heart is saying another. They were constantly at war since I met Thane. So why don't you go for her instead of annoying me all day? Surprisingly keeping my voice from shaking and cracking. Because she's right in front of me. I looked up at him to see him staring directly at me with his eyes displaying nothing but honesty. I wondered for a brief second who he was talking about as I looked around for the girl he so lovingly described. But when I saw no one there, I reluctantly turned back to meet his humid expression set on me. I was shocked as I came to the realization that he was talking about me. Taking my silence in a wrong way, he quickly stated, "I'm sorry. I know I'm overstepping my boundary. I shouldn't have said that." I was about to tell him no and testify he was wrong, but before I could respond, Bailey quickly appeared out of nowhere and thankfully saved me from my inner turmoil. "You guys ready? We're not getting any younger," she said, walking towards what I suppose was the garage. "Come on," Thane said, taking my hand in his as we walked to the vehicles. Once the garage door opened, I was dumbstruck. There were a lot of vehicles. A few vans, a couple bikes, a Jeep and a Mustang which I desperately wanted to test drive. I was in awe. Color me impressed Thane. Thane led us to the Jeep, which was surprising because I took him for more of a race car type of guy. "This is one of my babies," he said to me in a proud stance. "Can I drive?" I asked hopefully. He looked at me for a few seconds before responding, Another day, I promise. But I'm sure you can drive. I gave him a disbelieving look as I grumbled under my breath. I'm sure I can drive way better than you. He somehow heard what I said and chuckled as he opened the passenger door for me. I must admit, I never met anyone who did the simplest thing of opening my door. Once I got in and he closed my door, I threw Bailey a thankful gaze for saving me just moments before Thane started the engine. Step 3 was completed as we drove away from the crowded and trapping house. I must admit, the Jeep drove smoothly and the rumble of the engine was a hum with no sound of any weird clanging, and I could tell he took extra care of his vehicle. How long will you all be? Thane asked, breaking the silence that engulfed us. I narrowed my eyes at him, knowing exactly what he asked. You aren't planning on waiting in the car park for us, are you? His guilty expression answered my question before he did. What? No way. He lied in an off tone. So you weren't planning on being the overprotective person that you are? I asked, leaning closer to his face to pressure him into telling me the truth. He turned his head briefly to look at me, and I then realized how close we were. A few inches to be exact. If he decided to move his head any closer, we might as well be kissing. I promptly moved back from the close proximity. Eyes on the road. I yelled at him. He wiggled his eyebrows at me suggestively before returning his gaze to the road. But strangely enough, there wasn't another vehicle in sight on the road. WWW. You two are so cute together. Totally meant to be. Bailey said in an adoring tone. Thane just chuckled at her sudden outburst while the tips of my ears turned red. Thane kept sneaking quick glances at me until he finally answered my pending question. I was actually planning on waiting in the parking area. He shamefully answered. I knew it. I called out. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You got me, but I'm still waiting on you two. This made my blood from my face drain. Even if he wasn't with us, I had no chances of escaping. What? No, you can't. I said a bit too briskly. He narrowed his gaze at me. And why not? He asked in suspicion. I racked my brain for a viable explanation so he doesn't see through my lies. Well, for starters, you promised you were going to give me some space, and I am. He confirmed. Waiting in the same area as us isn't exactly what I call giving me space. I gave him a pointed look. Plus, don't you have work or something to do? You can't possibly tell me you don't have a job. He warily took my words into consideration, giving it a lot of thought, before he finally but hesitantly agreed. Fine, but I will call Bailey's phone to check up on you. Knowing that was my only option, I accepted his offer. Okay, I grumbled. The rest of the car ride was quietened when we finally reached the shopping area. I could practically taste freedom. Bailey got out and I was following suit until Thane gently grabbed my wrist and gained my attention. I looked at him confused because I was moments away from completing step 4. Arriving at my destination, he pulled out his wallet from his pocket and handed me a sleek black credit card. He held out the card to me, but I didn't move to take it. I was never the one to accept money from anyone. I even hated asking my parents for cash, and I most definitely hated being treated as someone's charity case. This is to purchase whatever you want. Go crazy. There isn't a limit and my bank account is loaded. He shrugged as if it was no big deal. That's supposed to impress me. I faintly asked while warily looking at the piece of plastic. He laughed before replying. If that puts me in your good books, then yes, I suppose. But honestly, don't worry about anything. Buy whatever and how much ever of anything you want. He said, shoving the card in my hand. What was I supposed to say? Thank you. I can't accept this. It isn't my place and it isn't my money. Plus, I'm not some charity case. I grumbled while trying to forcibly give him back the card. No, Emery. That's not what I meant. Listen. Everything that's mine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You're also my responsibility now, which makes this card is yours to spend. It's my job to take care of you. Please just accept it. And how else were you planning to go shopping without money? He asked with a sparkle in his eye. I was speechless. I slipped the card into my pocket while giving him a grateful look, knowing that this may be the last time I see him. I did the most irrational thing I could think of. No, I didn't jump his bones. I did, however, give him a hug. Without thinking twice, I leaned over the console in the Jeep and wrapped my arms around his neck. He was taken aback by my sudden contact, but as soon as he got his bearings, he wrapped his muscular arms around me in an endearing and comforting embrace. Thank you, I whispered into his ear, even though I should have been saying, see you later, kidnapper. I must admit it was a strange experience, but it definitely was an unforgettable one. Are you okay? Thane asked, giving me a calculating look as I pulled away. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, giving him the best smile I could manage. He looked at me warily but continued, I will see you in a few hours. Don't forget to call me when you're done. With a see you later, I was out the vehicle and checking step 4 off my list. I knew I couldn't immediately execute step 5 of my plan or else Bailey would get suspicious, so I had to do the one thing that was practically Satan's spawn. Shopping. I mentally cringed at the thought. I looked at the quiet street that was lined with little boutiques as Thane's Jeep pulled away from the curb and drove off. There wasn't a single car on the street and it was a bit creepy but oddly peaceful. There wasn't much people either, but it was a strange town. As we walked into the first store, Bailey asked, so how was sleeping outside on the forest floor? I was embarrassed that she knew. Wait, how did you know? Did Thane tell you? I was suddenly regretting hugging him. She laughed at my sudden embarrassment. No, silly. However, everyone in the pack knows. She gave me an easy smile to somehow make my mortification a little less harsh. What were you doing out there anyways? She asked to take my mind off my dilemma. Shooting her a guilty smile, I said, I may or may not have insulted Thane. He must not have taken that too nicely. He sure didn't. Even left me outside alone. What if I had died? I asked, exasperated. She narrowed her eyes at me. He didn't leave you alone. He had some of the guys patrolling around the house. They must have been a few feet behind you. Plus, Thane sat by the window in the living room keeping an eye on you until you fell asleep. I wasn't even sure if he blinked. When you finally fell asleep, he rushed out to you and brought you inside. Her confession was news to me. Suddenly I felt guilty for what I was about to do. I knew I shouldn't be feeling this way. But our hearts played by its own rules. He really cares about you. You know, Bailey told me as she took in my silence. I'm sure he does, I said, being half truthful. Come on, let's get back shopping. I smiled and her face lit up. We possibly spent around 2 hours shopping. Bailey picked out most of the things for me while I bought simpler, comfortable clothing. I didn't spend much because what I was frugal into. I didn't want to spend Thane's money too much if I was running away. I bought a couple dresses, but mostly jeans and sweaters. Who knew if my plans were going to fall through? Right. After those 2 hours my feet were incredibly sore and I decided it was time for step 5. The last step in completing my task. I got Bailey to go sit in a cute little cafe and get something to eat, as I told her I had to use the restroom. While she was at the counter checking out the donuts, I slipped Thane's card into one of my shopping bags as I walked away from Bailey's sight. I slipped out the door without Bailey or the cashier noticing. I was half walking and running down the street, towards the forested area, knowing I only had a few minutes until Bailey noticed I was missing and called Thane. I ducked in between 2 stores as I got out of sight from some of the curious glances of the people who was walking around the street. I breathed in the fresh air. I felt as if a weight was lifted from my shoulders and I can finally breathe again since the ritual. Step 5 intact. A huge grin adorned my face as I whispered to myself. Mission accomplished. Hook, line, and sinker. Not knowing which direction to go in, I just began to run. Anyway, far away from where I was. I figured would be far better. I finally felt liberated and free again as I did, and as I exited the little alleyway and saw the forest not too far away. Chapter 10. Marry Me. I finally felt liberated and free again as I exited the little alleyway and saw the forest not too far ahead. The moment was over faster than I thought possible. In a blink of an eye, my freedom was taken away just as fast as I had attained it. I felt a large, masculine and worn hand clutch onto my wrist, hauling me back into him. I could feel my heart beat rapidly pulsing against my chest, both from running and for what wrath I was about to face. I struggled against his hold, but it was of no use. His grasp was like iron chains. He spun me around to face him, and I regret looking into his eyes. In those brown eyes I grew accustomed to for the past few days were now filled with a fiery and burning anger. Long gone were the soft ties that held security, care and passion. I quickly averted my gaze as I felt guilt bubbling inside me, threatening to spill out of my mouth with words of apology. Words I dare not say. So you're not going to say anything? His voice was dangerously low, and I could feel the anger aimed at me, hitting me like a ton of bricks. Never been in such a situation with Thane. I didn't know what to do. So I zipped my mouth, then threw the key in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Look at me, Emery. He raised his voice as his grip on my wrists tightened. You're hurting me, I meekly mumbled. As soon as I said that, his grasp loosened incredibly, but he still held on to me, probably afraid that I would run again. His eyes flashed sorrow, but anger quickly consumed him again. Look at me, he repeated as he lowered his voice. I disobediently looked anywhere but at him. What? Cat caught your tongue. First you had the decency to run for the hills, and now you wouldn't even look at me. Stop it, I yelled, finally looking. More like glaring at him. Stop acting like you're the victim here. Stop pretending like you were worried. And for the love of God, stop acting like you actually give a shit about me. As if you actually care if I leave or not. He growled at me. You see, this is what I don't get. From day one I kept showing you that I do care. Yet you keep shoving me away and acting like I'm hurting you. I'm protecting you. Can't you see that? Protecting me. The only one you're protecting is yourself. You're afraid that if I got away from here that I would rat you out to the police and you wouldn't have the satisfaction of killing your latest prey. When would you get it through that beautiful head of yours that I do care about you? I would never dare hurt you, and I'm not your fucking kidnapper. You're so goddamn stubborn. He removed his hands off me as he brushed his hair back in frustration. If it wasn't for the current predicament, I probably would have been a pile of mush, as he called me beautiful, and his now ruffled hair looked irresistible. Instead, I looked around to find that the surrounding area was irritated. There was suddenly no one walking around in the street outside of the alleyway. I turned my gaze back at him, seeing him waiting for a response. I'm the stubborn one. You're the one refusing to tell me why I'm here. If you aren't my kidnapper, then what the hell are you? Because you sure aren't my friend at the rate we're going at. You've kept me in the dark for too long. You've kept me away from everyone I love. My family. My friends. Not to mention that you haven't told me why you brought me here. I told I would explain everything when it's time. And when is that? The next time those vile creatures come back for me. Those monsters in the woods. Or are you waiting to sacrifice me to this town's own little pagan ritual to the frickin' beast? I said, disgusted. As I mentioned the beast, his face contorted into something between anger, sorrow and guilt. Then it all made sense to me. Realization struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I felt sick to stomach. Bile rose to my throat as I looked at the man I thought held a speckle of care for me and horror. That's it, isn't it? I uttered in a quiet voice. That was your plan this entire time? He looked at me in confusion. Emery, what are? You captured me from the beast so you can just hand me over to him yourself. You're not willing to risk your own people, that's why you stole me. So now your town can jump in joy as you have a total stranger to sacrifice. I trailed off as hurt filled my voice. That's why you're protecting me. That's why no one talks to me, and why you act so sweet and innocent when you're realistically not. Let me guess. Luna means sacrifice to your town. Thane walked closer to me and cut my checks, making me look up to him. Listen to me now. Save it. I don't want to listen to you anymore. I said, drained of all emotions as I felt my heart to my stomach. I moved out of his hold and the sparking electricity passing between us. I turned away from him and moved towards his jeep that was parked right outside the alleyway. I felt him hot on my trail as soon as I moved one leg. Don't worry, I'm not running away. Would you give me a chance to explain? I turned to him with a poker face. I've heard enough from you, Thane, and I don't want to hear anything you have to say. There could be no explanation or any excuse for what you're doing. I climbed into the Jeep before he had the chance of opening the door for me and pretend to be chivalrous. I knew he was too good to be true. I don't know why I cared so much about what he did. After all, he was the one who kidnapped me from day one. Yet I felt my walls crumbling around me as my heart squeezed in pain. This shouldn't hurt as much as it did right now, but if I was being honest with myself, I trusted him. I trusted every word he said, but after this, I mentally slapped myself for being so gullible. I thought there might have been a better explanation for why I was here. I was hoping for one, but now my hope faded into oblivion. I tried to will my tears away and keep up my strong facade, but it was of no use. I was going to die anyways. The brick wall I had built around me since I got here finally started to crack. As Thane entered the vehicle and shut the door, I felt the first drop of tears stream down my cheek, betraying me. I quickly wiped the droplet away, but it was to no avail as more started pouring in a silent cry. I turned my face away from his view as he keyed the ignition, and I looked out the window, but my sniffles gave me away. I didn't want him to see me break down, but I couldn't help it. Before he drove off, he turned my face to his view with a shattered look on his own face. He wiped the tears away as he looked at me helplessly. It's not what you think, isn't it? I grumbled. You act all kind and protective, but you're nothing but a callous, selfish asshole. Language. I'm going to curse if I want to. To my extraordinaire, Madeline Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, I said, moving my face away from his hold. He pulled out of the parking lot and began to drive back to his house, otherwise known as my hostel. We forgot Bailey, I said, remembering the bubbly blonde-haired girl. Lucas will get her, he assured me. He remained silent for a moment until he got all serious. Emery, I don't want to be the one to bring tears to your eyes. I want to be the one to put a smile on your face. I looked over at him to see him shifting his gaze from the road to me, waiting for my reaction. I put back on a poker face to not let him have the satisfaction of knowing that I cared. How could I let him have that victory after what he is going to do to me? That's the cheesiest line ever heard, I said in a monotone. Why'd you run? He suddenly asked. Isn't it obvious enough? I asked, and he gave me a confused look. You brought me here against my will, Thane, and I now find out that you plan of sacrificing me, I said as my voice broke. He ignored what I said and carried on. Was I that bad to you that you felt like running away without being able to talk to me? You would have stopped me, I simply stated. Damn right, I would have. So is all what happened today you just playing me? Just a joke? Just you trying to get away from me? You were actually that gullible, were you? I didn't play him. I was jealous of Abigail. I was hurt by what he said to me, and I actually felt my heart flutter when he said I was the one who stole his heart. I was, because what I told you was the truth. You're the one for me, Emery. His voice was filled with hurt. I sneaked to look at him, and he was tense and his knuckles were white from holding the steering wheel so tightly. If I really stole your heart, then why are you doing this me? Is this your way of punishing me because I unknowingly captured your attention? I questioned, that he remained dead silent. I guess I might once again. You're doing this because you like Abigail, aren't you? And you think I may jeopardize your little bed buddy? Abigail doesn't have anything to do with this. Oh, spare me. I saw the way she looked at you. If that's what you want to believe, then I wouldn't stop you. Wouldn't you ever just listen to what I have to say? He asked, frustrated. Why? So you can just lie through your teeth and mess with my head? He went dead silent after that, and for the rest of the journey the air was thick with tension, and I felt emptiness inside me. An emptiness that was brought upon by my inevitable fast approaching death. When we arrived back to his house, there was a new car parked right outside. Thane spotted the car and sighed loudly. Just the perfect timing, he said sarcastically. I jumped out of the Jeep as soon as he stopped, and before he could cut the engine off, to express my growing hate for my hijacker, I slammed the door on his precious Jeep for added effect. Maybe if he cared an inch for me what he does for his vehicle, I might have a chance to live. But unfortunately for me he doesn't, and he isn't anything but a cold-hearted imbecile. I bounded inside quickly to avoid Thane for as long as possible. Emery, wait, he called out to me. Blinded by cascading tears from my eyes, I hurtled into someone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Thoughts of thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I managed to get out as I wiped my eyes clear. The woman looked strikingly familiar, especially her brown eyes, but I can't say that I've ever seen her before. Together with her there was a girl around 16 years and 2 twin boys who looked around 8. Hi, you must be Emery. The girl chirped at me and pulled me into a hug. I'm Tate, Thane's sister. I was a bit taken aback from meeting her, but before I could say anything, the little boys greeted me. It was Thane's brother. One smiled up at me, and I could see all their resemblance to Thane. My name is Thomas. And I'm Teddy. The other one smiled up at me. They all looked at me with worried expressions at my tear-stained cheeks as I tried to wipe any tears away. The older woman looked at me curiously before she said, "Why don't you all give Emery here a minute?" But Tate was about to fight her, but the woman held up her hand. "Take the boys to the kitchen. Would you, Tate?" Tate gave me a small smile before she and Thane's 2 brothers all walked off. The woman walked over to me. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked in motherly tone as she placed both her hands on my arms in a comforting hold. I shook my head, unable to speak before my voice broke and my tears started again. I heard the door behind me shut close as it rattled my bones, signaling I was once again locked away. "What did you do?" the woman asked in an accusing voice which held me confused, but when I looked at her she was looking behind me as she aimed her question. "Mom, now is not the time," he softly answered. So this is who she was and why she looked so familiar. It was because she's Thane's mother. I stepped away from her hold and looked at her in horror and disgust. I shifted my gaze from mother to son in disdain. How could they even look me in the eye after what they're planning to do? "Do you know what your son is doing?" I spitted out at her. "Of course you do," I accused before she could answer. "With all due respect, Mrs. Blackwood, I despise you people. How could you condone such a thing? You and your entire little town are just holding me here to sacrifice me. How could you allow your son to kidnap me and hold me here against my will while you all plan my sacrifice?" I raised my voice at her. She gave me a confused look before turning her gaze to Thane and daggers at him while he looked at her guiltily. "Sweetie, whatever Thane told you, you must have gotten it confused," she gently said, looking at me with pity. "Your precious son didn't tell me anything. He forced me here and wouldn't even give me answers. This is why you have the story wrong," she continued hastily. "There isn't anything you can tell me that would be a reasonable excuse for why I'm here. As for your son, please tell him to leave me alone." I ended my rage with hurtful words as I stormed upstairs. Thane's mother's eyes held such hurt that I knew I hit home and instantly regretted what I said to her. But that's the thing about words. Once said, they can never be taken away. I went straight into his bedroom and locked myself inside, as I had nowhere else to go. Somehow over the past few days I had become acquainted with this room as it brought me a strong sense of security. I opened the balcony doors in much need of a breath of fresh air and some quiet solidarity. I sat down on one of the cushioned seats as I breathed in the air as it cleared my stuffy nose from crying so much. My tears were long gone, but the heartache was still there. I couldn't get it wrapped around my mind that Thane betrayed me. Wanting to rid myself of all things Thane and sacrifice-related, I looked over the balcony down to the most magnificent garden I have ever seen. There were various flower beds holding vibrant buds of tulips, roses, sunflowers, and dozens more, while flowers grew around the perimeter of the huge backyard which led to the forest. There was also a lovely pond and a few benches scattered around the beautiful surrounding. A few children were playing among the flowers, and I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face at the sight. I always had a soft spot for kids and loved the company of the little bundles of energy. I used to babysit all up back in my old town to make a little extra cash, but honestly I loved the kids. I don't know for how long I just sat there looking at the kids play, but before I knew it, the sun was setting as I gazed at the beautiful scenery as it lowered behind a distant mountain. Sooner than I wanted, there was a persistent knocking on the door, and there was only one person I could think of. "Emery, open the door," he said from the other side. I ignored him and went inside the bedroom as the kids left the garden and went inside. Thane kept knocking and calling. "Please, Emery, open the door," he begged. "I wouldn't stop until you do," he insisted. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Open the damn door. I rolled my eyes at his fake interest in what I'm doing as I closed the doors to the patio. At least say something so I know you're all right. If you don't, I swear I will break down the door. Not wanting to see his face just yet, I decided to answer his stubbornness. I'm fine. You can drop your act now. I heard him sigh in relief. Thank God. Deciding a good relaxing bath should remove my pent-up anger and stress, I stepped into the bathroom. No matter how long I stood under the shower, it wasn't long enough. I quickly changed and exited the bathroom. I paced the length of the bedroom, not knowing if I should exit or not, but I was starving. Deciding food was better than an empty stomach. I took a deep breath and exited the bedroom once I knew all my emotions were gone and I wouldn't break down again. I just had to get the tears out earlier for all my pent-up sadness I have kept since the ritual. What shocked me was Thane sitting on the floor right across from the door. As soon as he heard the door open, he looked up at me. He stood up and looked at me as different emotions flashed through his eyes. Relief, anger and guilt. I walked past him into the kitchen as I looked around for something to eat. But everything he had was to be cooked and I definitely had no clue on how to do that. What would you like to eat? Thane asked, walking behind me. I shrugged and I went to sit at the counter as he moved around the kitchen whipping up something. How could you say something like that to my mother? He calmly asked, but I knew he was angry. After what you're doing to me, I didn't think I was in the wrong. I replied with a shrug as guilt was eating at me. After putting some pasta to boil, he turned to me with an irritated look on his face. I don't want to fight with you, Emery. I'm sick and tired of it. Ever since you've gotten here, we have done nothing but fight. I avoided his gaze as I knew he was right. But was I in the wrong for acting like I did? He went on after my silence. With that being said, I just want you to know that I'm like this because of myself and not my mother. She's the best parent anyone could have and I'm solely to blame for my behavior. Is she still here? No, my parents left a while ago. I shook my head, not knowing what else to say. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Thane asked, and when I looked up at him, he was right in front of me on the other side of the kitchen counter. How can I explain myself to you? Would you give me 10 minutes of your time to just clear the air and explain that you were too fast on concluding why you're here? He gently asked. No, I began, but he cut me off. Please, Emery. You don't ever listen to me. Never, he said, agitated. Just give me a few minutes. I promise you that I would leave you to believe what you want after. But you have to at least hear me out first. I hesitated before I nodded at him to go on. If I was going to die, I guess I needed some sort of explanation and closing so I could rest in peace. Or pieces after the beast is done with me. He looked appeased at my answer and went on to finish our dinner. By the time he was done, I had a scrumptious plate of pasta and chicken set before me. We'll talk after I'm sure you eat, he said, taking a seat next to me. I discreetly shifted to the end of my seat farthest away from him, but Thane, being Thane, noticed. He placed his hand around my waist and shifted me and my still impossibly close to him. Now eat, he commanded as he whispered into my ear. I glowered at him before grabbing a fork full of pasta as Thane laughed in amusement. I was in heaven. It was the best pasta I had ever tasted, and I quickly devoured it. Thane must be enjoying it as well because he ate a lot. Like enough to feed a family of 5. I gaped at him after his last round of food and he sent me a sheepish smile. After cleaning up, Thane led me to the living room where he pulled me down on the long couch right next to him. So what do you want to tell me? That I'm right? He scowled at me. If you would give me a chance to get a word in, you would know. I rolled my eyes. Go on. I tapped my feet beneath me as I got comfy. You're wrong, he simply stated. About which part exactly? I asked when he didn't say anything else. Everything. He sighed as I egged him to continue. I didn't bring you here for a sacrifice. And I definitely didn't bring you here to kill you. You're kidding. I never kid, he answered seriously. I was baffled. Okay, so let's say actually was to believe a word you say. I still don't know why I'm here, so why did you bring me here? To marry me? I laughed in his face at his terrible joke. You're right, Thane. I don't believe you for a second. And you say you never kid. I'm not joking, Emery, he said in a serious tone which wiped the smile straight off my face. Yes, you are. No, I'm not, he said, looking me straight in my eyes and daring me to defy him. Then where's the ring? I asked nonchalantly. He visibly froze and I smirked because I knew that's one thing he couldn't just have lying around. But when he got up from next to me, it was my turn to be frozen. Walking straight into his bedroom, he disappeared for less than a few minutes with a box in hand. A very tiny, scary-looking jewel box, and I felt anxious in the worst way possible. He plopped back down right next to me as he pulled out a beautiful ring. It was a sort of rusty silver-colored band that was etched with a tree bark pattern that was unlike anything I have ever seen, and placed in the center was a gem. The gem was a dark silver-colored dime, and that looked pricey. Whose ring is it? I asked timidly. It belonged to my grandmother, who specifically gave it to me to give you. So technically it's yours. I can't accept this, Thane. I tried pushing his hands away, but he quickly grabbed my hand. Thane, what are you doing? He smiled at me as he placed the ring on my right hand and finger instead of my left. Don't worry. I'm not proposing. Yet it, as a promise ring. Your wedding ring will be saved for your left hand. But I want you to know that I plan on marrying you, he said, kissing my hand. I'm not marrying you, I said in shock. You will. You can't force me into matrimony. I wouldn't force you, Emery. But when the time is right, I will ask. And you will say yes. What if I don't? I wouldn't give up until you do. However, I'm 99.9% sure you're going to say yes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why is there a 0.1% chance of me saying no? I asked with raised eyebrows at his cockiness. Well, there's a 0.1% chance of you not liking me, which isn't going to happen. Keep dreaming, buddy. I rolled my eyes. I can protect you, Emery, if you let me. I can protect you from almost everything that can happen to you in the outside world, he said as he took both my hands in his and placed them on his lap. I didn't know how to feel about this guy. Yes, I practically set my mind to hate him earlier, but we had this invisible yet powerful connection that I just couldn't shake. I was so in believing that he didn't want to kill me, but then I felt bipolar for changing my mind so fast. First I hate his guts, now my mind is screaming at me to believe him and give him a shot for no feasible reason. Was it really realistic to actually even think about liking him? Well, if it isn't my very own superhero. I faked swoon. The Superman to your Lois Lane. I like Spider-Man better. I'm sticking with Superman, sweetheart. Sweetheart. Sounds cute. He smirked at my disgust. So why did you bring me here to marry you anyways? I decided to change the subject. He paled at my question. Before I can explain that to you, I need to show you something so you can fully understand. I was confused by his cryptic explanation. What do you have to show me? Who I am, he said, avoiding my questioning gaze. And who are you? Don't tell me. Your name isn't Thane Blackwood. I guessed. No, I'm Thane, all right, he said, letting out a little laugh. I'm just worried about what you don't know. Unless you're a psycho serial killer that likes to marry his victims before he kills them. But I don't think I have anything to worry about. I gave him a pointed look. So come on, tell me who you really are. You will hate me. Now how are you so sure? Because I know you enough to know that you will. He looked at me sorrowfully. You clearly don't know me enough. Plus, I would never hate you. I may strongly dislike you right now, but I don't think I can hate you. Yet, I said cautiously. He chuckled at what I said. Glad to know. I didn't think you can hate me anyways, he said, bumping his shoulder with mine. So you gonna answer my question or? I trailed off. Not yet. But before I could complain, he continued. Tomorrow I promise I will. I want to be outside when I show you. But you have to promise you wouldn't hate me, he said, making me swear I wouldn't. I didn't get what the big deal was. I wouldn't hate him for who he is without knowing his story. That would just make me judgmental. So I promised him. I said sincerely, finally hoping that tomorrow all my questions will finally be met with some answers. One question, though, I asked, and he reluctantly nodded. What's a Luna? He grinned at my question. A Luna is the motherly figure of the pack, my wife and my equal who helps me run my hectic pack. Also known as you. I felt nervousness growing inside me. Run your pack. Aren't they your family? Yet some biologically and most non-biologically, but we have all been together for centuries. Ever so often a new family will join us and they live with us and secure a place for the next generation to come. They are protected in our lands and we all need a leader. My family has and will always be the leader. As the firstborn heir of my family, I automatically received the leader position. And you being my future wife, you're my Luna. What makes your family the leaders? I asked, trying to juice as much information as possible. Well, for starters, my family is the strongest in the pack and has said to be the wisest. The second in command and third in command are of different families. Usually the second strongest family. In this case, it's Lucas, my best friend. And the third in command is the best fighter and trainer, who is Bo. Of course, if anyone wants a chance to become the leading family, they will have to defeat the leader, me. But that isn't going to happen. Very cocky. I noted. How would one have to defeat you? No, I am the strongest person here. Not trying to defeat me, are you? He asked, which made me blush. To defeat me, they will have to fight me. Till death, he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. Death? I asked, shocked. What kind of barbaric traditions do you all have? It's what we grew up learning and following. But don't worry, sweet pea. No one will dare challenge me. Someone should. Just to wipe that proud smirk off his face. So, what does a Luna do exactly? I asked curiously. Why don't I show you tomorrow? After all, before you show me who you are? I asked skeptically. I wasn't sure if he was tricking me by saying tomorrow he will explain when he could just be putting it off. After I explain and show you who I am. Once you don't kill me, that is. I will explain. I smiled at him. You know you're dead set on me hating you. What if I actually do? Then I'll kiss you until you forget your name. Real smooth lover boy, I said, playfully shoving him. You should probably get some sleep, Thane said, looking at the clock on the wall. I looked at the time and it was barely clock. What? No way, let's talk. We have never had such a civil conversation. It's almost refreshing. Thane's eyes sparked with interest as he asked. Okay. Then why don't you tell me about the beautiful Emery Aiken? Chapter 10.5 Thane's P. Oh, the Emery was the most stubborn person I have ever met. I couldn't believe she attempted to run away. Not to mention she came up with the delusional thought that I was going to sacrifice her. She definitely brought out my anger and my love for her. I didn't tell her that she was wrong because if I did, she would have insisted for the truth. Which I wasn't ready to tell her. Not yet. But I knew if I didn't tell her soon I would lose her, and I couldn't even bear the thought of such a thing. When we pulled up to the pack house, I knew I was going to be in some serious trouble. My parents' car was parked outside. If they only knew I haven't told her about me, they would definitely disapprove. I couldn't stop Emery though because she jumped out of the Jeep before I even had a chance to park. Emery, wait. I called out to her. When I entered the house, I wasn't surprised to see Emery in my mother's arm as my siblings all walked away. It broke me to see her crying, but I couldn't tell her the truth or else she would hate me. Are you all right, dear? My mother asked her. She placed both her hands on Emery's arms in a comforting hold. What did you do? My mother asked in an accusing voice toward me. I looked at her guiltily. Mom, now is not the time, I softly answered. Emery stepped away from her hold and looked at her in horror and disgust. I knew what she was going to say, and it was all because of what I had her believing. Do you know what your son is doing? Of course you do. With all due respect, Mrs. Blackwood, I despise you people. How could you condone such a thing? You and your entire little town are just holding me here to sacrifice me. How could you allow your son to kidnap me and hold me here against my will while you all plan my sacrifice? My mother gave Emery a confused look before turning her gaze to me and glaring daggers while I looked at her guiltily. My anger increased towards Emery, but how could I be angry when it's my fault she didn't know any better? Sweetie, whatever Thane told you, you must have gotten it confused, she gently said, looking at Emery. Your precious son didn't tell me anything. He forced me here and wouldn't even give me answers. And there she goes again with me being her kidnapper. This is why you have the story wrong, she continued hastily. There isn't anything you can tell me that would be a reasonable excuse for why I'm here. As for your son, please tell him to leave me alone. Emery finished her wrath and stormed upstairs. My mother's eyes held such hurt, and I knew Emery instantly regretted what she said to her. It hurt me to see my mate insult my mother to her face, but if I had just told her the truth. Giving Emery some needed space to cool off, I turned to my mom. Mom, I began, but she cut me off. You haven't told her yet. What are you waiting for, Thane? Haven't I raised you better than this? She shouted at me. That's my mum for you. Mum, I'm handling it, I simply said. You better be. I can't believe you have the poor girl believing that you plan on killing her. If your father had done that to me, I would have rejected him from day one. That last line felt like she threw a brick on my face. Reality finally caught up to me, and I knew she was right. You're right, Mom. I should have came to you months before to help train me on winning over my girl, I said, sheepishly rubbing the back of my neck. You sure should have, she said, smiling as she wrapped her arm around mine and led me to the kitchen. I stopped her before we entered and said, about what Emery said to you. She didn't mean it. If anything, it's my entire fault. I'm sorry, it's all right, sweetie. I know that she didn't mean any of it, and I understand how confused she is right now. After all, I was in her position 20 years ago, and I was regretfully a bit rude to your grandma. She offered a gentle smile. Thank you, I said, grateful for my mother's kind heart. As we entered the kitchen, my father, Carson, was stuffing his face with cherry pie, something I learnt that Emery loves. My sister and brothers were all out in the backyard. Oh, Carson, don't I feed you enough at home? My mom smiled. My father gave my mom a toothy grin before unwillingly eating his pie. Sorry, dear. He moved over to her and gave her a hug. That was what I admired the most about my parents. They were still head over heels in love after 20 years. Even though mates are usually like that. But my parents were different. I wanted that for Emery and myself. Honey, you must hear what Thane has done. Or not done in this case, she told my father. Thanks for selling me out, Mom. I grumbled. Let me guess. He hasn't told her yet. My dad was spot on as he laughed at my deflated expression. Precisely. Tell him that he needs to explain everything to her as soon as possible, and not of her thinking he is going to kill her. My mom explained. Oh, let the boy do it as he please. He will have to face the consequences after. He shrugged, and I smiled until he said, but what is it about her thinking you're going to kill her? Before I could get a word in, my mom cut me off. He told her that he brought her here to sacrifice her to the beast. What? That's the stupidest thing I've heard. My dad glared at me. Thane, you need to tell her in order for tradition to go on next 20 years. I know. I just need to make sure she doesn't reject me. Also, I never told her that. I just didn't correct her. Oh, and what are we going to do with him? My father asked my mother. That's for him to deal with. Just once he doesn't hurt her feeling, she said, walking outside. My father watched her leave until he motioned me to my office. When we entered, he began on my case. Son, if it's one thing I learn about mates is that you tell them the truth as quickly as possible, even though it may be scary. In our case, you have to tell her. The sooner she knows, the better it will be for the both of you. She may think she hates you, but she actually doesn't. Deep down, she has probably started falling for you already. I sat down, tired of just thinking about approaching her with what I had to tell her. How do I start? My dad patted my shoulder as he sat next to me and told me it was up to me to decide. After that, we discussed a few of the pack businesses and basic training skills, as well as the recent attack from the Rouges. My family left soon enough, leaving me to deal with Emery. I walked up the stairs slowly, dreading to face her wrath. I knocked on my room knowing she was in there. No answer, so I kept on knocking. What if something was wrong with her? Emery, open the door, I yelled. Please, Emery, open the door. I begged when she didn't answer. I wouldn't stop until you do. I insisted. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Open the damn door. I heard the doors to the patio closed, so it brought me some relief. At least say something so I know you're all right. If you don't, I swear I will break down the door. Still worried? I'm fine. You can drop your act now. She finally answered me. I sighed in relief. Thank God. Even though she insulted my interest in her, I was grateful she at least answered me. I heard the shower start, so not wanting to leave her alone, I sat across from the door hoping for her to come outside when she finishes. As soon as I heard the door open a while after, I looked up at her. I followed her to the kitchen and made pasta for both of us. Even though she was guilty about what she said to my mother, I still questioned her about her actions. She was justified in her explanation, but I just had to ask her. I explained to her that I don't want to fight with her anymore because that has been the only thing we have been doing since I brought her here. That was step 1 of my plan to telling her. After dinner I implemented step 2 of getting to know her a little better, which had me intrigued. I of course promised to tell her my secret the following day, which had me anxious, but her sweet laughter comforted me. I wanted to talk to her all night, but when I saw her eyes closing on her, I knew I should let her sleep. I just prayed tomorrow goes smoothly and she doesn't reject me. It's time for her to get answers.